I'm a huge fan of products that enrich our lives and move forward the human race. All right, cheers. The start of 100 days.
So Bobby, here's the problem. I know you're a massive Apple fan. He's a massive Apple fan, in case anyone hasn't noticed.
I'm a huge fan of products that enrich our lives and move forward the human race.
So I swear, if we search our Slack workspace for enriching human lives, it will all come from Bobby, and it will be the most regularly repeated phrase. So this guy's a massive Apple fan. And we've had lots of debates about Apple over the years, whether it's 30% commission, whether it's privacy, or anything like that. But of course, there's a massive headline recently, where Apple basically decided that they were going to secretly look at everyone's images to check whether there's child abuse imagery. And so, Bobby, you want to give some context on what this new policy is, and then we should talk a bit about it.
So my understanding of it, based on what I'm reading on, let's say The Verge, because I haven't gone through the entire case, is anything that you have on iCloud is not going to get looked at by a human.
Yeah.
It's going to automatically be looked at by essentially an algorithm that scans the hashes for the photo to see if there's an exact match for that photo and something that's in the database for exploitative photos.
Yeah.
After that, it gets sent to whatever the local officials are to hunt down the people who are, the bad actors. Am I worried in a sense for privacy?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And this is to be overly critical of everything objectively, of course, is that up to a certain point, algorithms are flawed. There's no perfect algorithm. So what's going to happen is, let's say you take a bath photo of your child, and then suddenly it gets sent to some team who's doing content moderation, and then it potentially gets sent to officials, even though it's like an innocent, either you're changing a diaper or just like a family photo.
Yeah.
So that's my main worry with this.
Yeah.
And if it was a perfect world where we had an algorithm that can perfectly match everything, does not have a human in the loop that is potentially either getting disturbed or also essentially being turned on by this kind of thing, I think that's where it can work. But I have doubts based on the current development of just AI in general and just machine learning in this space.
Yeah, so I get the part about if you had a perfect algorithm that just discovers every photo correctly and sorts them correctly, that this would work. But even if, let's say, that algorithm existed, it seems like what Apple is getting here is effectively access to everyone's photos and the ability to assess them for legality or illegality. That seems to me to be a massive jump from what they had before. And it's really confusing to me because Apple's built literally their entire 21st century narrative around privacy. Like, Tim Cook has defined his entire tenure by emphasizing privacy. And they've said they won't break phones for the FBI. They've said that this is the central difference between them and any other social media app. But suddenly, every photo you take on the iPhone is no different from published public videos on Facebook, right? That Facebook would be, scouring over, right? Why is Apple able to now content moderate what you take in your private life?
Well, that's not necessarily true.
No.
There's no commercial purpose for essentially them running the automated system to check, if something is actually, causing harm to a child.
Yeah.
And I think the intention is good.
Yeah.
And the counter argument is they could be losing a battle in Senate where they're asking Apple, like, hey, what are you doing to stop, what are you doing to stop terrorism? What are you doing to stop child trafficking or, child abuse? And I can see them losing the argument on the other hand as well. Because, they are so hard into encryption. If they mitigate that by saying, hey, we have some automated checks to make sure, hey, all this encryption isn't allowing for exploitation as well.
Yeah.
The method, I don't necessarily agree with, though.
Yeah.
I think it gets in the too gray of an area where there is potentially human in the loop,
Yeah.
and that's where it becomes a little bit icky in the sense of all this. Yeah, it's much better than simply just Google or Facebook scanning your photos and then
Sure.
tagging all your friends and then selling you ads, based on who else in your circle of friends, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's where I fall into this is it wasn't great execution.
Yeah.
Because there was no FAQ until everyone blew up.
Right.
At Apple, right? The intention is good.
Yeah.
The execution could be a lot better, and the execution could be a lot better. They are relying on a good source of automation, but I think they're going to walk back from this a bit
Yeah.
and look at some way where only if it's an exact hash will it get sent somewhere. But I worry that this is actually going to lead to unsubscribes from Apple One or iCloud.
Yeah.
Because now people are worried, hey, what if my baby photos get sent to some strangers? It might not be what happens in practice, but that's what's going to be perceived as by the public.
Yeah, and I get that there's no commercial reason behind this, like this specific use case. But the problem I have is that you're giving Apple the power to effectively content moderate anything that you're buying, right? Anything you're taking on your phone. And that's a massive leap in power. Like it's really a really massive leap in power. And I also get that it's different from Facebook and Google and what they're doing, and content moderation and all those things. When you're publicizing your photos is fundamentally different, and they're trying to sell you ads and all that kind of stuff. But neither of them have the ability to do this to the phone, like to the phone photos on your camera roll, right?
Well,
like Facebook asks for
neither does
access
Apple,
to your
to be
camera
fair.
roll. But then that's what Apple's doing now.
Well, it's the iCloud photos, so it's stuff that you're technically uploading.
Well, but it encourages you to upload every single thing and back it up on
fair.
iCloud Drive.
Yeah.
So effectively, it's kind of like Facebook's asking for access to your camera roll, and now Facebook's suddenly content moderating that shit too, right? Like that's a massive leap in power. And what I also don't understand is why is Apple doing this right now? Right? You mentioned just now about Congress and if they didn't do this, there could be arguments the other way. But Apple has no inherent obligation against things like child abuse and violence and so on and so forth, right? Because they're not facilitating any of those things. None of their products actively make those things more possible.
I disagree. So here's the counter argument here.
Yeah.
One can argue that if you want to, do something in secret, like if people are actually planning a successful insurgency of the Capitol, and they want to keep everything encrypted and whatnot, they can use a privacy first device for all that.
Sure.
If they want to run like a trafficking ring, they can technically use a privacy first device for that.
Yes.
So it can be used as a tool for good, where it protects all users from the massive governments out there.
Yeah.
But in that same respect, it can also be abused.
Yeah, but so should every knife manufacturer, like including kitchen knives and all that, right, be responsible for reducing knife crime?
No, but
Right.
the thing, so I think there's no win-win situation for them.
Yeah.
What I suspect is they got whispers from some lobbying firm out there who says, hey, they're cracking down on tech companies for allowing harmful content, misinformation.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the bills that are being pushed, especially by Republican senators and congressmen, it's all about, it's all blanketed for the sake of protecting children, even though there's a lot of, hidden agendas behind it, right?
Yeah.
It's all for the sake of protecting children.
Yes.
And I wonder if this is actually them anticipating something that's going to be coming down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, so I get that. But if that's the case, then I think it's a massive, miscalculation.
Yeah, well, now Congress and Senate are both writing on both sides. They're saying, "Hey, Apple, don't do this." Like
they're writing privacy bills now.
Yeah.
to attack you.
But hey, I wonder if strategically this is actually what they were planning all along. Game theory-wise, they're planning one step ahead. If we do this, that means they're gonna ask us to do privacy first. And we win as a result.
Well, but then you have a massive, there are already lots of people saying they will never buy another iPhone because of this, privacy issue.
There's always people that say, "Oh, I'm not going to buy this."
Yeah,
but what's the alternative? You go on Google, and then Google knows everything about you.
Right? Yeah. No, it's fair enough.
Or what's the other one that asks for all your photos? Amazon, right?
Yeah.
They ask for you to upload all your photos and give you £5 credit for doing so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally selling your information.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with that, and you're basically betting on Apple being ultimately still the most privacy-conscious option. That's also the best product, right? And fine, I kind of get that. I just think it's a massive reputation blow for no reason, right? You have things like Facebook and Google who are actively facilitating worse social outcomes. You look at the recommendation algorithms on things like Facebook and Instagram, and it is actively pushing people towards more extreme content. Like Tristan Harris has talked about this a lot, but if you take in an average pregnant mother who joins a group for pregnant mothers, one of the central traits that Facebook then detects is that you are cautious about what you eat and what you drink and all the things you put in your body. And so the next thing they recommend to you are anti-vaccination groups, right? Because the traits are so similar, and the attention-seeking level of engagement of these groups are so much higher than average groups. And so you start tilting towards extremism and insanity. And so that kind of makes sense to me, right? Like Facebook and Google on YouTube and stuff like that is doing this. And so they have a responsibility to prevent these things from happening. But Apple seems to me to have always recommended privacy, has never developed anything that's a proper consumer social app. You're basically looking at someone developing hardware who is now shooting themselves massively in the foot for trying to do something like this.
I think they're going to have to play some recovery.
Yeah.
It certainly hasn't hurt the stock price.
Right.
So it was definitely a bad day for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's actually been either the narrative has just been trying to find some things to take down Apple, or generally speaking, there's actually been some bad narratives happening underneath since COVID started. You see, there's a whole thing about remote working, whether or not it's good or bad, and Apple forcing everyone to go back to the office, right? So, and now this might be used as an excuse, hey, we released this botched version of this privacy first but child safety thing, but we didn't get an FAQ page out in time before all this came out. This would have never happened if we were working in the office. I think that's the argument that can be made on their behalf. I disagree with that. But yeah, I think it's going to be an uphill battle from here. What I would love to see is something where if they did perfect a perfect algorithm that can do this, there's an argument for keeping it, right? But what I don't like is the fact that any algorithm requires a human to label data to see if it's accurate or inaccurate at some point, unless it's just perfect. But I've yet to see something where it requires no labeling by human at all. So at some point, some person out there is going to see pictures of potentially you and your children. In order to make the accuracy even higher. And so that's the part where I think I don't want to be the test subject for this algorithm.
So any policy that depends on a perfect AI algorithm sounds like a bad policy to me, right? It depends on really high quality data. It depends on really good training of that model in the first place, right? That sounds almost unattainable to me. And if we accept that literally any case of misidentification is a travesty, right? And I think this is the case, right? You're basically reverting the legal system. You're basically reversing the legal system. We have a legal system that presumes your innocence. In this case, it is not. It's presuming that you're guilty and then getting you to prove that you're not. Right, and you have this thing that's invading your privacy, that's looking into your phone to prove that you are guilty, and then asks you to prove yourself to be innocent. So that seems to me to be a massive travesty, right? That doesn't seem like something that's doable. And then if you take it deeper one level beyond the reliance on the AI algorithm itself, like, is this a slippery slope to you, right? In that we're starting first with this child abuse, concept, which is something that clearly everyone agrees is terrible, and maybe there's some fairly obvious signs of when a photo is problematic. But if we accept that Apple now has an obligation to scour their users' data to detect illegality, does that mean, well, if I take a photo of myself smoking weed and I have packets of weed in there, should I be detected, right?
Not in parts of America anymore because it's not legalized.
Well, yeah, but imagine in a place that's illegal and so on. Like, is that something that Apple now has an obligation to do? Because the principle we seem to be saying is Apple is a technology company that's collecting so much data now has an obligation to detect illegality, no matter whether they have an active role in facilitating that or not. Right? And how long does that tail extend?
So it's not a mandate for them to give access to any reports,
right,
to federal agencies, right? They're basically opting in to decide to report those.
Yeah.
I think there, in a perfect world, there'd be some middle ground, because, and just playing devil's advocate, they could potentially have access to the database of actual exported, photos out there or videos even, and they have hashes for that.
Yeah.
So that's basically as close to perfect sample size as we have, because we know for a fact, hey, these are all the photos that exist out there that we need to check against.
Yes.
If that's a simple check, it's hard to say if that's invasion of privacy completely, because if it's just a machine doing a one-for-one check, is that enough? And there's no human looking at it at all until they know with 100% accuracy that it's a one-for-one match of, hey, this photo that's been surfacing the internet, that is this person being abused.
Yeah. I mean,
is that an invasion of privacy?
Well, so that's when we get into a more legal, political type debate, right? But I think it is worth saying that it is an invasion of privacy, even if it generates a better outcome, right? So I could aggressively search. Well, actually, I could build a social credit rating system in the UK, right? Where I literally surveillance everyone, and then I will find 10 terrorists who are planning a massive attack. That is an invasion of privacy, but I did also prevent significant amounts of harm. So I don't think you could use the fact that it's doing good to defend that it's not an invasion of privacy. I think at best you could just say that invasion of privacy was worth it. But the question, I think, is basically, was it worth it or not? Because sure, there is some benefit in catching child abusers and so on, and that's fantastic. But you're essentially saying a technology company that has unprecedented access, probably more than any intelligence agency in the world, right? Unprecedented access to over 1 billion people's deepest private, photos and secrets and things they write to themselves and all sorts of things. You're basically saying give them access to all that content and give them moderation ability on that in order to catch a few criminals. At some point that power gets abused, and you kind of have a question, who is Apple responsible to? We give the police this power. Actually, we even have debates about whether intelligence agencies and all that should have this power. But we at least do it because governments are accountable to their citizens.
Well, you'd hope.
To some extent. In China and so on, it's not. And that's in many ways why we often question those regimes. But we're talking about a private company that is responsible to no citizens and only to their shareholders for profit maximization. Right? That is what they're responsible to. That is what their ultimate accountability lies. Why do they deserve this power? Right? That seems to me to be a super difficult thing to justify.
Let me ask you this: why have we put them in power with our wallets?
Well, we pay for convenience and good products all the time, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that they then have power over our privacy and our identity and so on.
But I think this is a consumer choice thing.
Yeah.
If you make a decision,
Yeah.
even at the very beginning of like Apple, like
Yeah.
you're like, hey, I'm gonna commit to this ecosystem.
Yeah.
You're taking a bet on that ecosystem by buying that device,
Yeah.
by buying the music, by buying videos, using iMessage,
Yeah.
Even Gmail, right?
Yeah.
You made a bet into that ecosystem,
Yeah.
and by doing so, you essentially vote with your wallet, or vote with your daily choices.
Sure.
So it's not so much like an explicit, hey, I'm going to give you stuff, but it's whatever you're doing with my data
Yeah.
is worth the convenience.
Yeah.
It is essentially what this decision should be, right?
Right.
Whether or not consumers all do that, probably not.
Yeah.
Most people just click accept on everything.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that's the critical thinking that we should get into as a society.
Well, but this is the problem because, okay, so first of all, whole argument rests on consent, and we should talk in a moment about whether consent is actually sufficient for this. But second is like, okay, if we accept consent is the only thing that matters, like, I made a conscious decision to go into this ecosystem, therefore, I accept all the consequences that follow. This is clearly not informed consent, right? Because if the vast majority of people don't read a contract and then sign accept, sure, it's their fault, right? It's their fault that they're not reading the contract, but it's not informed consent, right? So that consent in the first place is kind of dodgy. Like people don't actually know what they're signing up for. And then secondly, let's assume I am the perfect consumer. I am reading every single thing in that terms and conditions, and I've read everything there. I could never have anticipated when I bought my iPhone 2 years ago, with Tim Cook talking about privacy as the central plank of Apple's strategy, right? I could never have assumed 2 years ago, at that point when I purchased the product, that 2 years later, every photo in my camera roll that I backed up on iCloud Drive is now accessible by Apple to assess for some crime, right? I did not consent to that decision, nor did I have at any point any participation in that decision, right? I have no power to influence it. I have no ability to participate in it, right?
So, yes and no, because
Yeah.
the moment you decide, hey, I'm gonna use iCloud Photos instead of getting a phone with 1 terabyte storage,
Yeah.
that was a decision where you thought, okay, I'm okay with my stuff being in the cloud
Yeah.
and being on someone else's server.
Yeah.
So I think that actually is a decision there of whether or not I'm okay with my data being somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's right the way it's done now,
Yeah.
it's more of a philosophical argument, right?
Yeah.
It is a machine looking at your stuff, just as an example.
Yeah.
Is that enough to not be private?
Yeah.
If it's just simply no human involved, just an algorithm looking at it,
Yeah.
is that enough to break the privacy laws that we've established on society?
Yeah. But then that would assume that the moment I upload my data onto a cloud service or my phone, even in this case, I've signed away all my rights on that data. I no longer have control over it. I no longer have the right to control over it or consent over it. That seems to be really draconian, right?
It also has been happening
Yes.
since the beginning of
The internet economy.
The internet economy, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, and that and that draws us into a separate issue, which is okay. You've got this problem here where, since the internet economy began, people have basically been signing away their rights on all their data, and I guess you're on the camp that as long as you consented, even if that consent was not perfect, right? It's not informed, because you actively chose not to be informed because you're literally clicking accept because of convenience, right? That is true consent. We can take that. Does that bring into then another antitrust issue, right? Which is...
Oh, this is going to be another episode, I read.
This is a friggin' 4-hour episode that's coming here, right? But it's an antitrust episode because if I am a consumer who wants a touchscreen smartphone that has an app store, that has... This time we got helicopters. But if I'm a consumer who bought an iPhone or a smartphone or want a touchscreen smartphone that has the ability to have an app store and use different apps, I really only have 2 options in the world today. And those two options are Apple and Google. And Google, we all know, just takes all your data and does whatever they want with it, right? And then we have Apple, who says they care about privacy, and now they're taking your data and doing whatever they want with it. So that's an oligopoly, right?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, you have what's the Samsung operating system called?
I don't even know.
Or whatever Xiaomi is using.
Yeah, but then all of them use Android, right? Like they just skinned it, but it's the same shit.
You have BlackBerry OS.
Oh my god,
We're
yeah.
still
If
using
they
that.
still exist, yeah. Fucking RIM, like.
Android, a Fire OS, whatever it's called.
Yeah, but all those are still skins. Like,
Yes.
like the only thing, like there's not even a mobile Linux system, so you can't actually even do that. Like on desktop, you actually have some choice, right? But on mobile, you don't.
Stay
That's it.
tuned. We're gonna save this content for another episode.
Yeah.
So the only way you'll know about it is if you like and subscribe, please.
Yeah. Here comes the next episode. So, yeah. All right. That was a pretty good episode. Okay, go.